Okay, thank you very much. I'm in danger of having to run the disco myself, I think. So, look, from John Gall's last retail trades conference to my first, so I think I should just say, I think it's important to say that I obviously took responsibility for Tesco from January this year, taken over from Pauline, and so I think it's absolutely right that we pay tribute to Pauline and everything that she did over many years. So I will try and keep this short, but I've said that many times before and we've gone on for a bit longer, so I will do my best. I think we'll start with pay. It seems a lifetime ago that we did the pay negotiations within Tesco Retail, to be quite honest. And at the time, the pay deal delivered a 5.8% increase and a basic hourly rate of £10.10, which was re-established Tesco as the market-leading supermarket in terms of pay terms and conditions. I would say that was not a very easy set of negotiations, as any set of negotiations is never particularly easy, and I have to pay testament to the reps on the pay team in holding the company to account and ensuring that some of their asks through those negotiations were absolutely not on the final outcome. It won't come as any surprise that Sunday premium is something that they continually talk about ad nauseum, to be quite honest. And also, there was also discussion from the company around delaying the implementation of the pay increase in order to generate that income. Now, because of your reps and because of their influence on the business, we made it absolutely crystal clear that we were heading into a cost of living crisis, and to delay the pay in any way, shape or form was not acceptable. And it was because of that we ended up delivering a pay deal that actually started for the first time in a number of years, somewhere near your anniversary date, which was an achievement in and of itself. I think it is fair to say though, as my colleagues have said previously, events have overtaken us somewhat since many of those negotiations took place. And I think it was because of the input of the reps in the pay team and the original pay negotiations, and then subsequently in discussions with the business, that they never let up in terms of what the pressures were and what our members were facing on the shop floor day to day, and the potential economic catastrophe that some people were facing if the business did not do anything. I am pleased that the company listened to that. I am pleased that the company did respond, and obviously the announcement, I think it was last week, regarding the additional investment outside of the remit of the pay review to again re-establish Tesco's as the leading supermarket retailer in terms of the Big Four. So I think that was important, and again, we should not kid ourselves. That is not because Tesco's decided that was a very nice thing to do, and that's something that they should do. That was because of the input and the efforts of the reps and the union in pushing that agenda with the company constantly from the date of implementation of the pay rise in itself. I would just say one other thing on that, because although that increase is important and that additional investment is important, I think probably what is more important is the fact that we have now reached agreement to bring forward the anniversary date for Tesco Retail, which means that we will start negotiations with the company in January with a view to implementation within spring. And to head off any questions about, does that mean we've already had some of that pay increase and what does that mean for the negotiations? Our position is clear. The negotiations is the negotiations, and we will set out our stall accordingly in line with our campaigns and what the expectations of our members are. So moving on from pay, the other relatively small piece of work that's been taking place within Tesco Retail over the past year is obviously around workforce of the future. Again, many of these discussions started well over a year ago, and we have been in dialogue with the company for, like I say, over a year, and I think we had a meeting relatively recently with the company, and they suggested that I think there have been 40 plus meetings between the company and the union in looking at the workforce of the future and the implementation of new contracts. I think we have to recognise that any change is going to bring a degree of uncertainty out there, and I don't think anybody involved in those discussions is ignorant of that fact. But I think what is also absolutely clear is because we chose to engage, because we chose to negotiate, because we took on board our responsibilities to have those discussions with the company, we have managed to secure improvements to the contractual position moving forward. And I think probably most importantly, we've also managed to deliver a number of areas of the union's own New Deal for Workers campaign that I think, you know, again, I think the credit for that has to go to the reps who've been involved in those discussions over many months and many, at times, incredibly tedious meetings. But I think we need to call out exactly what those improvements are. We now will have a 16-hour minimum contract within Tesco Retail for the first time. We will, for the first time, have a clear, defined process for employees to request additional hours. There's a clear commitment from the business that any additional hours will be advertised internally first before going external. There's a removal of the 24-hour notice period for those that were previously on a flexi contract. There's commitments to 3 weeks notice for shifts. There's stronger commitments around overtime and cancelling overtime. So for those of you that may not have picked this up, if the business now cancel overtime with less than 48 hours notice, they have to pay you. And there is the opportunity for all staff to review, or there has been the opportunity for all staff to review their availability window and change their availability window with their managers ahead of the launch of the new contracts. I think on top of this, it's important that we also point out what we have managed to protect. No existing member of staff has to give any additional availability. And has the ability to fix their hours in exactly the same way that they operate now. Skilled roles are still recognised in the same way, and skills payments remain exactly the same. And importantly, we ensured that those skilled roles were recognised in their respective job titles, which was something like I said the company were very unkeen on doing, I think. And I think there's also important to point out there's no changes to things like the existing bank holiday policy and the existing bank holiday working arrangements. I'm at pains to point out that those things that we have managed to protect are a case of managing to protect because the company were after them as part of those discussions. So again, I think it's important that we recognise the hard work of the reps in that, in terms of what they've A, been able to protect, and B, been able to deliver in terms of improvements to the contractual arrangements going forward. Like I say, that's not to say that there aren't going to be any challenges in the launch of the new contracts, which is from tomorrow. I'm glad I'm not here tomorrow.
You can come back.
That's all right. They're busy.
Let's pick up your contract.
I think launching anything to over 250,000 employees is going to be a problem, and there will be misinterpretations, and there will be cock-ups, I think it's fair to say. But I think, as you well know, that is part of our role. That is part of our role as reps and shop stewards to make sure that we hold the business to account, to stick to what they said they are going to do in those agreements, and effectively audit what they've promised at a national level. Just because it's written down 30 times doesn't mean that the manager's not going to interpret it in a slightly different way. But again, that's why we're here, that's what we do, and that's what you will have to continue to do day in, day out, as you do with any policy and any procedure. What I would say on that is, I hope it's recognised that even though maybe some of the communication from the business has been average, that the union has done more communication, more information, more detail on the new contractual arrangements than perhaps we've ever done before. I think it is important to here to pay tribute to the Tesco support team in terms of the work. It's been covered in at least the last 3 newsletters. They've managed to turn around a guide to the new contracts in under a week. And hopefully you will be aware that we have been sending out regularly all member emails over the past few weeks, couple of weeks I think, picking out key bits to try and ram home what the message is to our members so that they know what their rights are. And again, I think if anybody, we still have to say we still get the odd query where a member rings up and says my manager knows nothing about these new contracts, which I find absolutely bewildering, to be honest. But you know, the information is out there, and we are getting the information out there, and it's for you to be able to challenge. It's for you to be able to challenge, and for you to be able to hold the company to account on that. Having said that, as you will also be aware, the company, unsurprisingly perhaps, have not got the technology right for the launch of the new contracts tomorrow. So we have sent out a communication about that. I think it was just yesterday. So in short, the technology isn't there for the scheduling to availability or to skill, and that will come in January, probably January next year.
I say March.
Yeah. They said January, they weren't specific about the year. But I think it's important to point out here that that does not delay the improvements that we've secured. So the improvements that we have secured start from tomorrow. And that's very, very important. We were very, very clear with the business that, okay, your technology is not ready, but all of the improvements that are going to come in, we want they should come in from the 16th of October regardless. So please make sure and please ensure that that message is landed in stores, and like I say, please make sure it's policed, and if there's any issues, which I know there will be, then make sure it is flagged as a matter of urgency, and we will do everything that we can to make sure they're rectified. Okay, so I'll move on from that. So just a couple of other hopefully brief comments. Many of you will also be aware that we did manage to secure an improved partnership agreement earlier this year as well. Again, something that, to be fair, was started under Pauline, but as you'll be aware, these things take time, particularly with Tesco, I think. And I think it is the diligence and the eye for detail from the reps that were on those talks, which has meant that we have managed to secure an agreement that we lost nothing, but we gained in a number of different areas, and I think that's very, very important. I'm not going to go through all of the areas of improvement, but I think we should recognise that, for example, the store forum situation now is a very different store forum situation to what it was before. So effectively now we have shop stewards committees in stores, because all shop stewards have a seat on the store forum, as opposed to the original position of one reserved seat. So I think that is very, very important, and I think it is something that we should absolutely make sure we utilise to our benefit to push our agenda through the forum process up to and including through the pay review. There are other areas, but I'm not going to go through them. I think we will look to, so on the improved agreement, we will look to be producing a guide, which will call them out. I would suggest, certainly in terms of areas around the induction process, which has been tightened up, I would, if I was to urge you to read one bit of that, I would suggest you go through there, because it puts very, very clear responsibilities and accountabilities in the store, and probably a mistake of mine, we've introduced a much faster way of escalating problems up to me to speak to the company nationally. Yeah, I think I'm a bit of a novice mistake, I think. So that's in place. Look, very, very quickly, I mean, they're obviously the kind of big ticket items, but as all of you will know, working in the retail sector means that nothing else stands still just because you're looking at new contracts, pay review and a new agreement. We have continued to engage with the business through the consultation and discussion group, which has led to some amendments to policies and procedures, which I will touch on very briefly. But I think it's important, we have to recognise that the company continues to instigate change programmes. I think the most significant of these, in terms of the retail space earlier this year, were the closure of Jack's, which I'm going to be honest, probably came as a surprise to virtually nobody outside of Tesco's. There was a number of store closures as well as part of that, where stores were coming to the end of their lease. There was the end of 24-hour trading across the estate. There was a reduction, similar to what Joanne was saying, there was a reduction in 24-hour in night replenishment roles, and there was a widening of the PFS remote monitoring. All of those sadly did lead to redundancies, but I would say through the collective consultation process, the union ensured both improvements to the redundancy package, redeployment opportunities, and also for the first time in store closures, we managed to ensure that the company agreed to listen to individual people's preference around what they wanted in terms of redundancy or securing another role within the store, which I have to say the company have been I'd say vehemently opposed to anything that maybe vaguely looks like voluntary redundancy, but I think we've certainly managed to open the door a little bit on that conversation. I think obviously there were other changes, although they did not result in redundancies, they will have inevitably had a significant impact on those involved. There was obviously further closure of counters, which you'll be aware of, and there's been a whole host of continued moving hours around. Again, I have to say, because of agreements that have been reached previously, predominantly led by Pauling, we faced into those restructures without the need to look at redundancy, which I think is incredibly important. And I do know, and sometimes it comes as a surprise, that people are sometimes disappointed that that's the case because they want to be made redundant. But it's not our job to get you made redundant, it's our job to save jobs and get more jobs within the business. So I think that's important that we recognise that. Finally, I just want to say in terms of policy and CAD, so similarly that's Dave's point around the menopause guide in Sainsbury's, we have now secured a guide in relation to menopause within Tesco's, which was launched earlier this year. And I'm also pleased to say that we have now had further discussions with the business to ensure that any menopause-related absence will now be excluded from the absence percentage. So that's a secret. It's not out until Tuesday.
It's in the policy. It's in the sickness policy.
Right, so it's still a secret. But anyway, so it's going to be launched. It's embargoed until Tuesday. But as with all these things, it's already out there. So I bet it's a nice surprise for you. Look, I mean, I think that's it. Really, obviously I'll try and open up to questions, but it's 26, so keep it short.
Thanks very much for that, Daniel. Thank you. So I'm going to take a quick round of questions, and I'm going to try and pick people who haven't asked before. And I've just had a notice that we've got to get out of the room, so I'm going to go for Lady there, Jackie there. Who else am I supposed to be there? Trish, there you go, that's before, and as a reminder, we have got to get out of the otherwise we'll be getting anything else, so there you go.
Hi Daniel, I'm Samantha, sorry actually I'm a store manager, sorry guys, but I am. I work on convenience formats, and I just want to actually say the one-on-one, absolutely, I am with him 110%, and I am still pushing my area manager, so absolutely well done. So very quickly, it's just about the opening hours for Christmas, for convenience formats. So obviously we all have Christmases, we all like to spend time with our families. Unfortunately, convenience will always at the last of the ones that we always on Boxing Day, New Year's Day, we work extra hours, 6 till midnight, Sunday, Easter Sundays. Is there anything in the pipeline to actually give our colleagues some time off with their families over Christmas?
Hello, I'm Jackie Thurwood. You've mixed my question. I was going to ask if there are any talks on closing early on Christmas Eve and closing altogether on Boxing Day.
No, too much money.
Who's the next one? I can't remember. Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
so just to
Yeah.
get that.
Back on the list, 43, new elected regional council. I've got two questions there actually. First one is location pay. Where are we with that as work pay was looking into it? And also with the pay, will it be from day one when it's decided, or will it be 5 months later like it has been?
Thank you. And then last question at the back there.
Just wanted to thank you for everything you've done for us over the past year. I don't need to say it all, you've just been through it all. You've been very modest and you've thanked all the reps from the National Forum for doing it. But to be honest, you were a huge influence in the guidance, and I don't think we'd get half as much as we would have without you. So thank you. My question's around, I went to my SC forum on Wednesday, and they've spoken about the shrinking security managers and their redundancy. The company seemed more interested in the shrink side rather than the security side. They told us that they were 12 million down, so I don't understand if they're red why they're getting rid of these shrinking security guys. But with the economy the way it is, we're going to get more robberies, we're going to get more abuse, we're going to get more shoplifters. Is there anything you could do to try and get more security into these stores?
Thanks, Trish. I'll go to you.
Okay, so Sandra and Jackie, I'll try and do those at the same time. I guess the short answer is we will always be pushing every employer and every retail employer around a reasonable break for colleagues over Christmas. Unfortunately, we do not control their opening hours, so as you all know, and I think there's been several discussions here, including the discussions around lone working. You know, it doesn't take a genius to work out why they do what they do because they're concerned about their profit margins, and I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that we ram home that message that that is not the only thing that they should be looking at when they're looking at A, how they trade, and B, how they staff their stores. So I can say that we have, as always, written to Tesco's and the other retailers around Christmas working and what that looks like. We are still waiting their response, I have to be honest, and we have urged for as long a break as possible, an early close on Christmas Eve, and in exactly the same way as, to be fair, we would ask every single year. The challenge that we're up against is a business that wants to make sure that it tries to make as much money as humanly possible in as many opening hours as possible with as few staff as possible. And that's the difficulty that we've got. But I would say that we absolutely fall into line with our Christmas working and New Year's Day campaigns, and that's exactly the position that we take with the business. I can't promise that means that the Tesco's is going to have a Damascene conversion and go, actually that's a really good idea, we should do that. But I can absolutely guarantee that we will continue to push and press that case as far as reasonably possible. And I would encourage all of you who are involved in the forums and the pay review process for that matter, to make sure that those items are not forgotten. And I think it goes back to a comment that was made earlier. You know, we've raised it 8 times. Well, the reason that we keep raising it is because we don't do anything pleasing about it. So I think that's all I can say, I'm afraid, on that. I can't, no promises, no change, but we'll continue to push that. So Claire, location pay. So Look, I'm going to be honest, we did start to have a discussion with the company around location pay just before, I can't remember what it was, August I think, sometime. But the company's proposals around location pay, it may not surprise you, were not very good. So we have taken the decision to not talk about location pay any further because it was solely on their terms. I think it is almost inevitable that we will end up having a discussion around location pay as part of the pay talks next year. I think obviously the important steps that have been taking place in places like Sainsbury's in terms of the real living wage for London stores means that Tesco's is lagging behind. And I have to say, you know, we're not worried about pointing that out to the business. There's nothing immediate, but I would say it's almost inevitable that there'll be some discussion around that through the pay review process. I would say, however, that we would be absolutely crystal clear that if the company wants to fix a location pay problem through the pay review, then they need to find the money to do it. And you know, it's not for other areas of the country to receive a lower increase because they've got a recruitment problem in wherever. That's a company problem that the company need to sort out and fund. So watch this space, I guess. Trish, thanks for what you said. Very kind. Made me feel a bit weird. I would just say, so for those that aren't aware, that so the company have announced proposals around removal of shrink and security managers across the country. I'm going to go, it's hard to give you an answer at this moment in time because we started the collective consultation. Our first meeting was last week, I think, and we actually have shop stewards who are shrink and security managers that are on those collective consultation meetings. And one of the questions that we have already put forward to them and are awaiting a response is how does 250 roles go into 60? Because that seems to be what they're suggesting. Now the company is suggesting that they're putting additional money and additional investment in other areas. So as you would expect us to say, well, show us where it says that, and show us. And so we'll continue to push that through that collective consultation. But that's not the only place. So I think we have recently restarted the Health and Safety Working Party, which I think has been on a bit of a hiatus over the last few years. And again, security and is a key part of that. And I know there's been a big discussion about lone working, and we're starting to engage again with the business more materially on what that means and what that actually means for our members. I'm going to be honest, I think the biggest issue is the fact that people don't report stuff. And I understand why they don't report stuff. So we've got to make that as easy as possible, because once that information is there, then it's much, much harder for the business to hide and say that there isn't a problem. Again, we will do everything that we can in that regard. So I think that's it.
No, thanks very much.
Oh, sorry.
Which was, will we get pay rises?
Oh, sorry. The pay negotiations will be the pay negotiations. The anniversary date will be brought forward. So actually, it will not be July. It will be earlier than July.
Thank you.
Sorry.